Hey everybody, Leah Slaughter. Hope you are having a wonderful afternoon and a great start to 2021. This is a huge class today, and so I am going to take questions as I go. Some of the terms that we're going to be talking about today and some of the model may be something that some of you are not familiar with. And so I'm going to try to take my time and answer as much of the background information as I can. But for some of you that have never heard of the BRRR model or have never done a value play before, some of this may sound a little bit strange. And so if you have any questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out. Of course, as always, I'll give you all of my contact information, but I'm going to do my best to go through really just a general overview of what we're talking about and how it's utilized and why this is so important. So as always, before I get started, everything that I'm going to talk about today is my best judgment and my best guidance based on years of not only being an investor, but also owning and operating a real estate firm and doing property management. Of course, there's no crystal balls, so nothing that we're going to talk about today is a guarantee of performance or numbers. And anything that we discuss pertaining to lending must be discussed and verified with a lender. And of course, everything that I am presenting today is based on what I've seen, but not a guarantee of programs that may or may not be available to you. As always, we recommend that you consult with those in your life who you trust, your CPA, your attorney, and others who help guide you on your investment journey. We are one tool in that toolbox, but we are not the only one. Of course, we will always do our best to answer your questions and guide you, whether or not it is within our wheelhouse, but we'll always make sure that you have access to those professionals that can help assist you along the way. Now, we have some fantastic classes coming up, one of which is very related to what we're going to be talking about today. So I wanted to start by going over what's upcoming for the rest of this month. So January 21st, we're going to go over what to expect now that the election is over. Is it over? It's been an interesting few weeks, hasn't it? But definitely, I think that we are moving towards a path to smoothness, and my hope is that we're going to continue to see things calm down. Now, on the backside of this, we have a Democratic president, we have a potentially Democratic Senate, and we have a Democratic House. And so there are going to be tax changes. I don't think anyone questions that. The question's going to be, how is it going to affect us as real estate investors and owner-operators of real estate? How is it going to affect 1031 exchanges? And so we're going to talk about what to expect. We're going to have many people that are great avenues and resources for you. And also we're going to talk about how we may or may not need to change models and what we are doing for our real estate investments to fit these changes. So this will be a packed class, definitely one that I recommend you attend live so you can answer questions. And then on the 27th, we are going to be doing the pros and cons of Fannie Mae lending. Now, for those of you that don't know what that is, when you hear 10 doors in your personal name, that's your Fannie Mae conventional lending. And so this is going to be going over why it's important, why some of us use it, and why some of us don't. And so that will help you make a decision as you move along your investment journey. And this will actually tie into what we're going to talk about today on this BRRR model and what type of end financing you want to have. Now, you may be thinking, what is that? Well, let's get started. For starters, let's talk about what is this model. And so for those of you that have not heard this before, this is a way of buying value play real estate. And by value play, what we mean is buying something that needs to be fixed up and that you fix up, and at the end, you will have value or equity left over. So this is not a model that you would use for new construction. This model can also be used for anything that has significant equity. And the goal of using this model is to allow that equity to act as down payment. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, but essentially think about it this way. If you're buying a property at 90% of value, and let's just assume it needs no work, so you're buying it at 90% of value. If you were to go with traditional Fannie Mae financing, you would be bringing 20% down for said property. So that 10% equity does you no good other than when you sell. And of course, although many of us are selling every few years to capitalize on equity growth and appreciation, we also want to have as little cash in a deal as possible because that skyrockets your cash on cash return. And it also maximizes your leveraging ability to buy more property. So by using the BRRR model and then our modification of said model, we are using some of that equity as down payment to reduce the amount of cash that we have in every deal, to reduce the amount of cash we are bringing to close a deal, and to maximize the number of properties in our portfolio and our cash on cash return on every investment. Now, the traditional model means that you buy a property, you rehab the property, you then rent out the property, and then you refinance the property based on the end value. There are a lot of different terms that we're going to be using today. And so I'm going to take a moment and explain what all of these mean, but please know if you have any questions along the way, feel free to reach out to me through the question box that you have here on your screen, or you can reach out to me after, whatever is more convenient for you. So first we're going to talk about ARV. That is your after repair value. So if you buy a property and you fix it up, the ARV is what is it worth when you're done. Loan to cost, that means how much are they willing to lend against your total cost. Now your total cost is your purchase price plus your rehab. And I'm going to go over some of the numbers for the specific deals we're going to be talking about today as examples. So if you were to buy a $100,000 property and you were to do a $25,000 rehab, your loan to cost or your total cost would be $125,000. So when we say they're willing to lend a percentage of LTC, that means they're willing to lend a percentage of that $125,000. But your ARV may be $150,000. And so we say if they're willing to lend a percentage of ARV, that means they're lending a percentage of the $150,000. Now that $25,000 spread between your cost and the ARV, that is your equity capture. And that is what we are looking to use towards down payment with the purpose of all of these different types of financings. Yes, this recording will be available when I finish here. So definitely this will be one you'll probably want to go back and watch again, and then you may have more questions after. Now the cash on cash return is the type of returns that we calculate here at OmniKey, which is what are you making on the cash that you have out in a deal. So when we look at a cap rate, we're really calculating what the 100% cash payment return is. And then that return will change on cash based on your leveraging. And so the importance of a cash on cash return, in my opinion, is because the more that you leverage a property, the higher that cash on cash return is going to be, and the better your rent rate relative to value, and then your financing opportunities are going to change that cash on cash. So when we literally talk about a cash on cash return, it's how much money am I making back for the amount of money I've put out. Looking at a cap rate, you're just looking at the performance of a deal. But that's only one piece of the puzzle because leveraging changes everything. Hard money is a type of upfront financing for a property needing repair that acts similar to cash. Very low qualification, really just the property and the numbers qualify, not so much you. It's very quick to close, but it also has a lot of negatives to hard money. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then value play, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a property that has value left over or equity left over. And again, that is your spread between your loan to cost or your cost and the ARV. So let's get started. These are the assumptions that we're going to be using today. You guys know I love my assumptions because it makes things very simple as we compare apples to apples. So the assumption that we're going to use is a purchase price of $100,000, a rehab of $25,000, your all-in or your cost of $125,000, an ARV of $150,000, and a rent rate of $1,300. Now, this is your math looking at the BRRR model. So let's take a moment and go through this. You're going to notice the assumptions over here on the left, the purchase price, the rehab. And then what you're going to notice is an origination fee for hard or short-term money. So what this means is when you buy this property, you are doing an upfront financing that is going to lend based on a percentage of the ARV, but also a percentage of loan to cost. The goal with this is that you are not paying cash for the rehab and then refinancing on the back end. Now you might be thinking, well, maybe I can just buy Fannie Mae and then do the rehab and just have my cash in the deal. There's a lot of reasons why that's not a good idea, the vast majority of which have to do with condition. Fannie Mae is not going to allow you to buy a property that needs roof replacement, foundation repair, etc. There are conditional requirements with any type of backed mortgage. Now, the other thing is you don't want to have that much cash in a deal. And if you were to have that much cash in a deal and you were to cash out refinance on the back end, on a Fannie Mae product, you're limited to 75% for a cash out. So a rate term refinance has a different ARV percentage that they will lend on as opposed to a cash out refinance, which then is going to take a hit on the ARV percentage they will lend. So again, that is the percentage of the value after repair. The problem with hard money, and really at the end of the day, the biggest issue is the huge fee up front, the huge interest rate during the holding period, and then having to do a refinance on the back end. But this is the normal model. And for most people, this is what they do all day long. And for a lot of people, this is the only option. We have worked very hard to make sure we have other options that save us some of this process to make things smoother and simpler and also cheaper. So let's continue looking at how the BRRR model works. So origination fee typically is at least 2%. The closing costs on the deal, let's say 3%. That could be a little low, but let's round numbers, 3%, and that's going to be your title fee, your title policy, because generally when you're buying these types of wholesale or value play properties, often you're having to pay all the expenses. So the closing costs could reduce a little bit, it just depends. Now on the backside where you refinance, you're definitely paying your title fees because there is no seller involved at that point. So your actual cost in this transaction before any holding costs during rehab is $130,500 approximate. Now at a loan amount of 75% of ARV, that's $112,500. Now it's possible that you would be looking at a property that has a lot of equity built in. Not a lot of those out there right now, but let's say you did find one with a ton of equity built in. You might be able to make 75% of ARV closer to the sum total of all of your costs. So the bigger a rehab you do and the more value left over at the end, the more that you're going to be able to save on your cash to close on the BRRR model. And that's because that loan to cost, if there's enough equity left over at the end, you may have enough equity to eat up the majority of what your down payment would be. But they're going to cap you on what your loan to cost is. It could be 90%, it could be 80%, it could be 85 or 95%. Every lender is different. So even if you have your 25% equity left over at the end, if your loan to cost is an 80% loan to cost or an 85% loan to cost, you're still going to have to bring whatever that percentage difference is of your loan to cost to what the total cost is. So if they say that their loan to cost percentage is 80%, you're still going to be stuck bringing 20% of the difference of your loan to cost for that extra 20%. So using round numbers, say that you have $100,000 equity left over, which equals 25% of your ARV on a, let's say, $250,000 deal. If the loan to cost is 80%, you would be bringing 20% of that deal's total value. And so that is where we're coming from. So we're looking at a simple rehab here, not a complete rebuild. For those of you that watch some of my properties, they're really bad. We may spend $100,000 on rehab. We may have more value left over at the end. And so this model may have a little bit better numbers in situations like those. But for your general rehab where you may be doing roof and kitchen and bath and that type of thing, generally you're not going to have 50% ARV left over. And so that is when this model becomes extremely expensive. Loan to cost, I have a question. Is loan to cost the same thing as loan to value? No, because your cost is what you are physically spending and the value is what the property is worth. So when we are doing this type of financing or any type of value play property, we're looking at really three different things. Number one is going to be the as-is value or what it's worth today before any work is done. And that really doesn't go into play with anything for the financing that we need to worry about for the purpose of this class. The ARV is what the value is after it's repaired. And that's what the AR stands for, after repair value. Then there's the cost, which is where the loan to cost comes from, that is just what it's physically costing you to buy and fix the property. If your cost and your value are the same, that's not a deal you want. The whole point of doing these transactions where there is rehab to be done is to gain equity or value at the end and have less money in the deal. So if you are in it for value, that's not what we recommend. There is no benefit to that. You might as well go buy something that doesn't need any work or that is already redone at value. Okay, let's keep going. So your cash to close in this situation is $18,000, and that is because you have to put down the 25% of the ARV. That is the equity that they require in it. So then on the back side, once the work is done, so you're going to pay your holding costs in the interim, and generally that interest rate is going to be 10 to 12% for hard money. So very expensive, but it is interest only. And then you're going to refinance on the back end and have another set of closing costs to reclose it at a title company, to redo a new title policy, to do the escrow fees, all of that, of around, let's say, $3,500. So your total cash out of pocket to do this model on this property is over $21,000. And that's the amount of money you have out in a property where you've got quite a bit of equity left over at the end, because your spread between your 125 cost and your 150 value is $25,000. So you've given up, and we'll talk about specific numbers at the end and the difference, but you've given up about $5,000 here by doing it this way, plus the higher interest rate during the rehab. So the negatives of this are 2 closings and 2 costs of closing, title insurance, escrow fees, etc. You've also got the high loan costs on the initial loan due to the origination fee or the points that hard money charges. It's typically somewhere between like 2 and 3% of the purchase price or value. You have a high interest rate during the rehab for your monthly holding cost. And for someone like me who may have a rehab that's 6 months long, that adds up very quickly. You can't refinance on the back end until it's completed, and often not until it's rented. You risk the loan changing or the same loan and terms not being available at the end of rehab as what may be available today, especially if you've been watching the market. Rates are starting to go up, and that's just because of investor changes with everything happening with the election. And so this is a perfect example that whatever the rate is today may not be available in 6 months. And then finally, as I noted, in Fannie Mae, 75% is going to be your max cash out on single family. So these are the negatives of going with the BRRR model. Let's talk about the positives, because there are great positives with this model. Quick closing with hard money. Usually they can close within 7 to 10 days. You can do a Fannie Mae refinance on the back end, which means a super low interest rate, 30-year fixed mortgage, but you're going to have that lower ARV on the cash out versus a rate term refi, which just means you refinance at the existing loan balance. You're not pulling any cash out. And then finally, the front end often has no personal qualification. Most hard money lenders don't give a crap about you. They may not even ask you for your income. They may not pull credit. They may not care. It just depends on what program you're going with. Now, there are some people who do front end hard money and a permanent financing on the back end all in one package, but the fees are still going to be exorbitant, and you're still going to have a higher rate in the beginning generally. And you have to remember right now, Fannie Mae rates, what we're seeing with 25% down is low 3s, and that's on investment property. So there's a huge difference when you're looking at 10 to 12%, or heck, even some of them I've seen where they'll do like a 7 or 8% for a 30-day promo, and then it goes up after that. And they're capitalizing on the fact that you're paying a lot of fees up front, you're paying fees again at refinance, and you've got that high interest rate, which generally your rehab's not going to be only 30 days, especially not right now. You know, they're capitalizing on the fact that it's going to take you longer than you think it's going to take you. Okay, now let's look at the way that we do our model. And before I go into this, I want to say we have specific programs and relationships with lenders that we work with for our investors. These products are not the norm. They are not readily available. And so don't think that you can go take our model and use it in another state or with someone else, and that you're going to get access to the same programs that we may be able to get you access to. You might be able to, and you might be able to work with the bank to do it. But I do want to be clear, this is not the norm. This is not something you're going to see everybody out there talking about. So I'm going to show you what the numbers look like, and then I'm going to show you one I just did so that you can really understand why we do it differently. It really, in a way, still is like the BRRR model, except it's one loan up front with the permanent terms already built in. So let's look at it. Purchase price, again, $100,000, rehab $25,000. The origination fee is going to be around 1% or less. Your closing costs, I'm going to use the same 3% in there. So your actual cost is now $129,250. The lent amount generally on these products is going to be at least 80% of ARV. So that is now $120,000 lent. And a cash to close would actually be $92,50 with equity capture. But I'm going to assume that the bank is going to say only 90% loan to cost. So I'm only going to lend you 90% of your 125 all in. So let's say that you wind up bringing $12,500, and this is an easy 90% LTC we can do all day long. I have some banks that go to 95% or 100%, which means if you have enough equity, you're going to bring nothing to the table except your closing costs. So in this situation, let's assume they've capped you at 90 LTC. You've now brought $12,500 to cash to close. You're going to have a regular interest rate product. We're seeing anywhere from high 3s to high 4s on these right now. You have that interest rate upfront day one, no high interest rate, no refinance costs on the back end, and generally for the first 6 months or 3 months, or on some of my 9 months, they're going to give you interest only while you fix up the property so that you're not also having to pay principal payments before you get a tenant in place. It doesn't have to be rented to be able to do this. This is a one loan product that gets you the same end result, but you capitalize on that equity upfront and you save not having to go do a refinance on the back end or a cash out on the back end. Now, there's some negatives to this model. Number one, they're slower to close. Generally, they need about 30 days. Their interest rates are higher than Fannie Mae. Now, Fannie Mae rates vary depending on what percentage you put down or how much equity you have. So if you're putting 25% down, you're going to probably get rates in the low 3s right now. But if you go to 20% or God forbid 15% with PMI, that rate's going to go up significantly. So it's not necessarily apples to apples a much higher rate, but it is still higher. You do have to qualify, but they treat this as a business. This is a commercial or portfolio lending product. And so what that means is that they're a little bit less worried about you and more worried about your plan, your model, and your partnership. And so just you having a property manager, you working with us, that actually helps you in qualifying with these banks that we use. And then of course, you wanting to be an investor, you having cash reserves, you being willing to maybe open an account there. There's so many different things that go into play. They look at the big picture. And then for some of you that have carryover losses, but lots of cash assets, this is a great product for that because you're not doing your traditional Fannie Mae approvals. The approval process for this product is far easier than say going for government financing or Fannie Mae or backed mortgages, much, much easier. Now, the one thing to keep in mind with these products is they are generally not 30-year fixed. I do have 30-year amortization and 30-year products, but the rate will be a little bit higher, typically more like 6 to 6.5%. So me and the others who are doing this model, we go with 25-year amortizations and either a 5 or a 10-year balloon or reset product where the rate fluctuates every 5 to 10 years. But again, we don't keep our properties that long, so that's not a concern for us. And if we were to keep it that long, we would generally be refinancing to capitalize again on built up equity. Now, I already mentioned that, what the interest rate is. Yes, okay, so these are the positives. So Mario, I'm gonna actually answer your question here. So the benefits of this are one closing, one set of closing costs. So you're only having to pay your title insurance, your escrow fees, your origination fees, all of that once. The low loan costs on the initial loan are due to the lower origination fee and points. So you're not having to pay that big upfront fee. And then you're also going to save on the interest rate during the rehab period. And again, you're often going to have interest only for 6 to 9 months. There's no need to refinance. There's no risk of no loan or a different loan being available at the end because you already have your permanent financing day one. And then for Fannie Mae, 75% max cash out on the single family is no longer a problem because this non-Fannie Mae model allows for a higher percentage of ARV, or the higher percentage of the end value for your leveraging, which means more money left over for more properties. And absolutely, LLC, trust, anything like that is okay. Some of them will not work with series LLCs. Now, I don't really do a lot of those. I don't really like those, and that's a whole different story for a different day. But often they will not work with series LLCs, and there are some limitations in terms of what state your LLC is created in. But if you're in one of the normal states like Nevada or Texas, not a problem. So your savings on loan fees is about $1,250 or more. Your closing costs saved are $3,000 or more, and honestly, it's really quite a bit higher than that. The total cash out of pocket, you saved almost 50%, and then you also saved on the higher holding costs because of the higher interest rate you would have with that short-term financing on the BRRR model. So you saved about $9,000. So if you figure your next deal is $9,000, say that you can get a 95 loan to cost on this deal, you actually have enough money for 2 houses instead of 1. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how we build the portfolio, like what Michael and I do. It's these loan programs and these different ways that we think outside the box that allow you to take your cash and move it further to be able to build that portfolio. So now I'm going to show you one that I just did. And I have to be honest, finding one I did that wasn't a total gut job was a little bit difficult. But I did buy this package. It was 2 single families on 1 lot. And I'm going to give you all the info. And I'm actually going to show you a walkthrough video before I go through the numbers so that you can kind of get a feel for what type of rehab level we are talking about here. And then we can go through how the numbers would have looked if I had done the BRRR versus how it looks right now with the way that I did it right now. So this is the address of the property, and then let me let you take a look. So the house they're walking through right now is a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom that I purchased. Okay, so let's take a break here for a second and let me tell you a little bit about this deal, and then we'll continue and move into the second house on the lot. So this deal, I purchased both houses for $95,000 or maybe $94,000, and the total rehab is about $60,000 for both properties. And so when we look at the rehab amount for this, it is almost exactly in line with the example that I gave you a moment ago. So we spent about $25,000, $30,000 per house. So this one is a 4-2 and the other one is a 1-1. So let's finish with this one and then move on to the next. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what this looked like. And so this is actually, for those of you that are on my Facebook, you've been watching us work on this one the last couple of weeks. I think we closed 2.5 weeks ago and we're finishing Friday. So it's gone pretty quickly. And this is a good example of exactly the type of property that we're talking about. I'm going to answer some of these questions and then I'm going to go into how this property would have looked and how it looks now. So one question, our conventional loans are typically for 20% down, or is 25% more of the norm? Most people are doing 20% down, even though 25% gets you a much better interest rate. But the one thing to keep in mind is that whatever equity you have in that deal or any value you have left doesn't go towards your down payment. And so if the property is worth 150, it doesn't matter. It only matters what you're paying for the property. So any equity left over, you really don't get to have any type of just benefit from. You would have to refinance on the back end to be able to take advantage of that. So this property, to kind of let you know, because I got some questions here about really what different rehab items we did. So this one actually had to have a complete foundation rebuild. So looks can be deceiving. Spent $10,000 on the foundation. Every beam had to be replaced. We did save the cabinets. We sanded, puttied, and filled because I don't know if you noticed, but that hardware was crooked. We had to redo the majority of the subfloors, rip all the flooring out, redo the bathrooms, fix all the leaks, repair the HVAC. The small house didn't even have HVAC. So we're in the process of doing that right now. We had to replace the roof, had to do some of the decking, the entire porch had collapsed. That's all being rebuilt, had to reside the majority of the exterior. So looks can be deceiving, and this is why you don't buy blind. This is why you always want to make sure you have eyes on a property, because just that walkthrough video, it looks pretty clean. Trust me, it wasn't. So, but that's the whole reason why we get the value deals that we get, right? Let's see, a few more questions. Yeah, absolutely better to see in person. Okay, so let's look through these numbers and keep the questions coming in. I'll keep addressing them as I go. So I've had to modify these numbers a little bit. I had a 1031 exchange on this, and I actually wound up putting a little bit more money in because I had the 1031. So I've modified the numbers to work for what it would have looked like if I didn't have any of those erroneous factors at play. So bear with me on this. So my all-in, including my closing costs, is about 164,600. Now, to keep it apples to apples, I'm not including my holding costs in there, but honestly, I've already pre-leased the big house and I've already got a tenant waiting to move in. So by the time I make my first mortgage payment, I'm already going to have it occupied anyway. So I've calculated that I would have put in about 18% down. I would have been able to capitalize on about 2% equity from this deal because of where the value is at the end. And I've put my rent number here on the left of what I thought the low range would be, and then what I actually think it's worth on the right. And I actually obtained what's on the right. And so you'll see here that the cash out of pocket on this transaction with the BRRR model would have been about 29,600, because again, when you do these loans, you're rolling in the rehab. The loan amount would have been 135, and on a 25-year AM, my cash on cash return would have been somewhere between 38 and 48% year one. So this gives you a really good idea of what it would have looked like if I had not done the loan program that I do right now. Now, let's take a look at what it looks like on my model. My all-in is now 160,000 because again, I've saved on the upfront origination fees. I've also saved on the back-end refinance. The down payment would have only been about 10% of the end value. So now if we look at the return, I've only got about 16,000 out of pocket, and my return is between 66% and 85.33%. So there is a massive difference between these two models just by the loan program that we are using and making sure that we are buying the right product. So all in, we saved about $5,000 in actual cost, and that is just savings on loan program and closing costs on the back end refi. We saved $13,000 out of pocket cash spent because on the upfront BRRR model, I would have had more money in the deal. My return jumped from 38% to 66%, and I was able to leverage increase $9,000. That's huge. So this is why we do it the way that we do it. And this is why we love the buy, rent, rehab, all of the pieces of this model. But we feel like there's another way we can do it to save just a little bit of money on your front end. Now, let's go through some of these questions. I have someone that says they need 5 of these right now. Me too. I went looking today. I went looking at 4 more, just trying to keep up with all my 1031s. And one sold while I was walking through the property. I had another one that I offered on that they want like $20,000 more than it's worth because the market is insane. I have another one that I offered and they won't budge off asking price, and it's about 8,000 high, and I'm still waiting to hear back on number 4. So I left and thought I was buying 4 houses today, and that definitely did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. So I've got some questions here about how this compares with new construction. So let me take a step back and talk about the pros and cons of both of those things and how we decide what's the best fit. So this model has a lot of risks. It's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. You can make a lot of money, you can gain a lot of equity, but there's a lot of moving parts. You're at the mercy of vendors. You're at the mercy of bids being accurate. You're at the mercy of finding properties that have enough equity left over at the end. You're at the mercy of making sure that you can actually find properties at all. And at the end, the return difference can be significant or it can be negligible. And so this is a great way to supplement a portfolio for someone who is not full-time doing real estate. If you have time to be driving and calling for sale by owners and doing all the things, and we always have properties like this, but generally they need a lot of work. Generally, they're in really bad shape. So you have to be prepared to do something like that and then work with contractors and be willing to have something that takes 4 to 6 months, and you might get shut down by the city or have inspection issues. And there's so many things that can happen. So the new construction model is a passive approach to investing that has great returns, great consistency, high growth areas, and 95% of our clients, that's what they do. And then we have about 5% of our clients and many people that we manage for that buy on their own that they are doing the rehab model. And it's a great supplement. Now, for me, I do both. Even at the volume that I'm at, I bought like 73 units last year. Even at the volume that I'm at, I still bought new construction. I'm still building new construction. So I'm a huge believer in both models, but there just simply isn't enough new construction to fill the need for the volume that I do. And that rehab model is what keeps my crews busy. And so for me, I think it's a symbiotic balance of both, depending on what your goals are and what you're comfortable with. You know, most people are going to look at these projects and it's not going to be what they want. They're looking for something passive for retirement. They're not looking to have to do all of this. And so we help handle as much of it as we can. And simple rehabs are much easier than complex rehabs. And you know, when you're doing these complex rehabs, I've got one property right now that's 700 square feet and my rehab's more than $60,000. And so, you know, one overage on a deal like that and you've eaten up the majority of your equity left over at the end. So there is risk associated with these, and some of us are comfortable with that risk and we understand it and we want to do it. And then some of us think, no, we really just want passive income. So some of my wealthiest clients do only new construction, and some of my wealthiest clients do both. And then some of my brand new newbies, they want to do rehab, and then some of my newbies just want to do new construction. So that's really a personal preference and a personal choice. And our investment counselors and me and, you know, anyone you want to talk to can help you make the decision of what fits best for what you're looking for. And the best guidance that I can give you is don't be afraid to do some work and to do a property, but know that you're not going to be doing a ton of them at one time because there's just simply not enough contractors for it and they take longer. And so I would get your feet wet with the small one, see how you feel about it. And then if you love it and you're here and you have time, then we can start looking at larger ones. So we can help you with either. In terms of how we find our deals, we have so many different ways that deals come to us: wholesalers, direct sellers, post-marketing campaigns, lots of different ways, some on MLS. It just depends, and we are constantly putting out offers. I think I've put out like 7 offers so far today just for me personally. Let's see. Okay, so this is a good one. There is no order of who gets what deals. When we send a deal out, it's first come, first serve. Sometimes I'll have a deal that I'll look at and I know it's a perfect fit for what someone is looking for, and I might call them with that deal. So you telling us what you're looking for is a big help. But in terms of these rehab properties, generally we already know that's what you want. We're already looking for that for you, and those aren't going to get blasted out. So if you're looking for a rehab property and you want a big rehab property that is a big equity play, that's something to let me know, and then we can let you know as those come up and as we find them. I will tell you the market is very hot right now, and for those of you that have been putting out offers like me, you know that. And so we're competing against people who are willing to work for very little return because they're coming out of markets where they're used to being negative, like California and New York, and even overseas in Europe. We're seeing a lot of that in Asia. So just be prepared and know that it doesn't matter what's going on with the economy and COVID and all of that. The market is crazy. In terms of the rehabs, we oversee all of that for you. Now, general make ready and those types of things are a no cost oversight from OmniKey. So we do all of that for you. But if we're managing one of these huge rehabs for you, there is a facilitation fee for that. And so it just depends on what the project is. If we're just doing foundation, paint, that kind of thing, that's not a big deal. But if we're overseeing this level of rehab, then generally there's going to be a fee similar to what your GC fee would be for a GC. We just basically oversee it for you and make sure that everyone's doing what they need to do. If you're here local, you're more than capable of doing that yourself, and I can kind of help walk you through that. But if you're not here, you have to have eyes on that project frequently. I do not have any contractors who can do these big rehabs unless you're working through us and buy it through us, because I don't have enough to spare. If it's little things like flooring and painting and that type of thing, we can handle all of that. But if we're talking these gut jobs and you're doing them outside of us, you'll have to locate and find your own contractors, because my people are just slammed. And if I'm giving them to you for a job, it's taking them off one of mine. The banks do not require a second appraisal after the rehab is complete on our model. On the BRRR model, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a Fannie Mae refinance on the back end, yes, they will require an appraisal because it's a whole new loan process. Often you even have to go to a different lender. But if you're doing one of the one loans that's broken into two parts, they might be able to use the upfront appraisal. But just keep in mind that that program may not be there tomorrow. I can't tell you how many lenders ceased lending when the virus started, and we don't know what we're walking into over the next few months with loan programs and rates. And so that model where you're waiting for a different program on the back end would bring me extra caution right now. Does our model change depending on what county the property is located in? No, it does not, but there are certain counties and cities that I avoid and I will not work in and I will not purchase in. And so if you're wanting to know what areas I would avoid and what areas we wouldn't be willing to do this in, you can feel free to reach out to me. As a foreign investor, can I use this kind of strategy? Yes, we have one bank that does utilize this type of product for foreign nationals. Now, if you have a United States social and US income, like say that I have many clients who are relocated with a US company working overseas, then you're just like any other buyer. But if you are actually a foreign national and a citizen of another country, we do have loan products that work for that. There are certain countries that are not recognized, like some countries in Africa and some of the other Asian countries, but generally a lot of our clients are in Canada or Australia or Europe, and that's all completely fine. Do you have to be in our area to do this model? No, you do not. This is something that we can assist you with if you're not here. Just as I mentioned, know that if you're doing a $30, $40, $50,000 rehab, I can't oversee that for free because I have to pay someone to physically monitor that. Let's see, how is the BRR model properties advertised? So it's interesting. You can do a value play purchase on any pre-owned property, no matter how little or how much work it needs. I have one that I'm doing right now that really doesn't need very much. I'll pull that one up for you while we're talking and I can show you what that looks like. Hold on. All right, let me put you over to this. Okay, so this is one that I just bought to kind of show you what a mild rehab looks like. And I didn't prepare this perform. I wasn't going to pull it up, but we're here, so let's just do it. So you'll notice that I have some fees at zero. These would not be zero for you because obviously I don't do it for free for you. I do it for free for myself. But the numbers would be pretty similar. And I can plug the figures in here so that you can see how this one works real quick. Okay, so this is how this property would look. So this is a single family home I purchased. It's just a few years old. And this one here is really very, very clean. And so I think that it's one that would be a great model for someone who's looking to do something extremely simple. Let me just get these. I want to make sure that the numbers are filled out for you here. So let me just fill this out real quick. So I'm just doing a prorated leasing fee right now. That way you can calculate all numbers and we try to be as transparent and inclusive as we can be, as you guys know. Okay, so this property all in, so let me modify this to kind of show you what we're looking at. Okay, so all in, I'm at 130, and that is purchase price, rehab, everything completely done. Loan amount is 113,100, and that is based on the ARV because the ARV is over 150,000. So all in, we're talking about a return at the end of the day somewhere around 18%. The rent rate on this should be about 1350, and so with this one, we're talking about negligible repairs. I think the total rehab budget on this one was 11,000. And that included painting the inside, all new vinyl floors, quartz countertops, new stainless steel appliances, 2-inch faux wood blinds, and that's it. So this one was extremely clean and needed very little. And so this shows you how on a mild model like this, even one that doesn't need a ton of work, you can get a great return. So assuming that I get in rent what I'm expecting to get, the return's going to be a little over 18%. And this is with property management fees and leasing fees for someone that was a customer and not for me personally. And the return with the principal pay down on the mortgage at a 25-year AM is over 32.5%. So this is really quite a great return. And then of course, that's why we bought it. But this is one that needed very little work. It's like a 10-year-old house, very clean. And so this type of model is very easy. And there's not a ton of these properties. You know, I can't have 100 on my list like I can of new builds that I can fill all day long, but they are available. They are out there. And even though the equity capture is not huge on this one, we're maybe 20,000, that's still a lot of equity capture. And so it's a great way to fill and to build the portfolio while still keeping within the overall model of the 2 to 6 year hold and using the 1031 and buying in these high growth, high targeted areas. So this just gives you an example of one that we just recently did. So this one I think is closing on the 27th of this month. I just contracted on it. Let me see. Got a whole lot more questions here. Jacob, I will send you a copy of this presentation since you missed the beginning. Just send me an email and then I will send that over to you. There's my email address for you. Let's see. Qualification of an LLC. Okay, this is a good question. So this is asking how the LLC is qualified. So very, very easy. They're actually not going to qualify your entity. They truly don't even care what entity you buy it in. They're going to qualify you as a whole. With these portfolio and commercial type loans, they're looking at you as a picture and not one entity you own. So like for me, when I get to a contract, I literally pick whatever company I'm going to put it in because I have to split between many companies, and the lender doesn't care because they're going to make me personally responsible for it, and they're going to cross responsibility whatever company I have that earns all the income if it's not me. So, you know, for me, OmniKey earns the majority of the income, but I have tons of other entities that earn income as well. So they're qualifying me based on all of my entities. But if I only had one company and that was the full source of my income, they would likely have that company guarantee the note for whatever properties you're purchasing, even if it's under a different name. So for you, it's about the whole picture. So if your LLC is brand new and it's never bought a thing, they don't care. They only care about what you as a big picture look like. And so if you have good income and you've got assets or cash, that's all they care about. I can tell you, I sent one of my friends to them that I think has like $60,000 or $70,000, so just enough to buy a couple with this rehab model, and got qualified no problem. I sent someone else who's brand new and he's a teacher and doesn't have a lot of money, just wanted to do one and got qualified no problem. And then I have clients that have sold businesses and they have carryover losses and they have $1 million in the bank and they too get qualified. So I have yet to have someone turn down. Now, that said, the majority of people that we work with have already done real estate or are in a position to financially be able to do real estate. And so if someone got to us that wasn't in that situation, of course, someone can be denied. I just have not experienced that yet. And you have to remember that these are relationship banks. And so this is not like going to Chase or Wells Fargo and trying to get a loan. Very, very different. I've got some questions about tours. We do not do weekend tours. We can give you information on areas to go visit and properties that are available, but we are big, big proponents on our people work their butts off all day, every day, Monday through Friday, and they're constantly taking calls on the weekends. We do not ask our investment team to work weekends. So we can accommodate a Friday or a Monday, but we will not accommodate a weekend other than an emergent situation. Average price per square foot for cosmetic repairs is completely impossible because it depends on the property and it depends on whether it's pier and beam, whether it's slab. I can give you approximate cost on items that get done, like flooring or countertops or painting or roofing or that type of thing. But I have some properties where I may spend $6 a foot renovating, and then I have one that I just spent like $60 a foot renovating. So it completely depends on the property. Questions about warranties after rehab. Some of the vendors that will do work will have warranties on what is done. Obviously, we're not the ones rehabbing it. We're hiring people to come do it, and then we're just watching them to make sure it's getting done. So the warranties are from individual vendors. And if you're doing a full replacement of something, there's almost always going to be a warranty with that. And then, of course, a lot of things require permits and the cities are inspecting. But if you're just making a spot repair, that may only have a short warranty. So it just depends on what it is. You know, appliances are going to have their own warranty. HVAC systems will have their own warranty. Roofs will have their own warranty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're, you know, fixing a pipe underneath a kitchen sink and it leaks again in a year and a half, that's very likely not going to be under warranty. But we do recommend and almost always put in place home warranties or residential service contracts to help mitigate some of those costs. Is the best strategy for this to sell every 5 to 10 years? And does this change if the 1031 exchange is not available? Yes, and that's to be determined. I absolutely do not think they're going to do away with the 1031 exchange. And we're going to talk about that at my class that's upcoming on the tax changes. You have to remember that the vast majority of Congress made their money in real estate. And so to get rid of the one thing that allows them to do that, I think is a very slim chance. And I also feel like they're going to be spending so much time right now just getting over everything that's happened and trying to move past it and come together. I really am very optimistic that the 1031 is going to be here to stay. I could be wrong, and I may be eating my words later, but that is my general sense. And you have to remember, at the end of the day, politicians are politicians, and they're going to say whatever they want to say. But these are a bunch of rich people, and they want to make sure that they can continue to make their money to get richer and richer. And so, if they were to get rid of the 1031 exchange, that would affect the vast majority of your wealthiest people who are vocally against it right now. So I will be floored if they get rid of it in its entirety. They've limited it some, and I think it remaining with just real estate is likely. And I think that cap gains are probably going to go up. I think that taxes are going to be raised. I do think all of that's going to happen. But in terms of disbanding 1031s, I can't see that. And I don't know that we're going to have this type of balance of power long enough to do that. But we'll see. And we'll keep you guys posted, obviously, with what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Do lenders care about your credit history and credit score? Yes. If you have delinquencies or you have a history of not paying your bills, you're likely not going to be able to get financing on a program like this. Another question. I do velocity baking, so I have all my liquid cash in a HELOC. Is there any seasoning requirements? Honestly, you're going to do, when you work with most of these portfolio commercial lenders, you're going to fill out a personal financial statement where you're going to put where your money is, and you're not going to say how long it's been there. You're just going to do a personal financial statement, and then they'll have you update that at set frequencies. And then you'll do a balance sheet, and you'll provide your tax returns. And if you work for someone else, they'll probably verify your employment. But really beyond that, those are the only documents I provide. I provide a schedule of rental properties and income. I provide balance sheets and P&Ls for all of my businesses, and I provide tax returns, and that's it. And that is the only thing that I need, and that's the only thing that I update. Any other questions? I think I've hit them all. If I missed one, I'm so very sorry, but I think that's all of them. So I'll do a last call for questions. And then you guys know how to reach me if you have any follow-up questions. I know there's a lot of content in this and some of the numbers can be kind of confusing. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. All right, I think that's it. I appreciate all of you guys staying on. This was a huge class. I'm glad that it brought value to you. And as always, we're thankful for you, not only for your partnership, but also for being part of the OmniKey family. And I look forward to seeing you guys again on the next class, talking about tax changes and talking about all the positives we expect, not just the negatives. So again, I thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure as always. Thank you for all the kudos. I really do appreciate that. And we'll talk again in a few days. Everybody stay safe. Happy New Year.